Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the live stream. Today, we've got a very good topic that should relate to most of you, considering that in this day and age, we're changing jobs frequently, and then also just in the music industry, a lot of changes are common, and of course, with layoffs and people getting new jobs. So, we're going to be talking about forgotten 401ks and what to do with your old retirement accounts. And this will apply if you work at a W-2 job or you're self-employed. So let's get right on into it. Before we start, wherever you're watching, right now I just stream from the Facebook private group, LinkedIn, and YouTube. Feel free to comment where you're watching from. I'd love to know where you're at. And if you're watching the recording, you can do the same. And at any time, you can ask questions, and I will check every now and then to see if we've got any questions, but then at the end, I can certainly answer your questions as well. So let's get right into it. Okay, so whenever we're changing jobs, leaving a job, starting a new job, starting a new business, whatever transition you're in, there's a lot going on. It's really easy to forget about your retirement accounts. They're in the back of our minds. Maybe you weren't really thinking about them that much. Even when you were working at the company you're working at, you might have set it and forget it. And I've worked with a lot of clients over the years who have had old retirement accounts at jobs sitting for years and years and years. And they have no idea where they are. They don't know how to access them, let alone what to do with them. So we're going to talk about all of that because it's your money. Let me switch over to my... Okay, but for those of you who have never met me before, and this is maybe your first time watching, my name is Spencer List. I'm a certified financial planner. I'm a holistic financial life planner for music executives, and just any executive, really. A lot of my clients are not music executives as well. But I am a former professional musician, so I do have a lot of strong ties to the music industry. Played all the saxophones and woodwinds at the highest level for a long, long time. I am not a big fan of small talk or holidays. I was born 5 minutes before Christmas, so maybe that has something to do with it. And I am caffeine free, so if we ever do get coffee, I won't get it, but you certainly can, and hopefully we can remain friends. I have nothing against it. Outside of music, I enjoy woodworking, and I grew up playing hockey, so I enjoy hockey every now and then. I'm an MF Doom super fan. Rest in peace. And I'm a husband and father of a newborn who's, I guess, probably now an infant, not so much a newborn anymore. But when I first started doing these webinars and live streams, our child was just born. So we're still in the early stages of parenthood. I'm currently listening to Nothing. It's the full album by Lewis Cole and the Metropole Orchestra. It's fantastic. Can't recommend it anymore. And it's live, too, which is crazy. Oh, and I guess my face is blocking my hot take a little bit, but your name is the most important word in the world to you, so get others' names right, too. Spell them correctly. Say them correctly. And most people spell my name with a C, right, because that's the typical spelling. Not a fan of it. But, other people have more uncommon names than mine, and it is the most important word to each of us. And so, not to say that anyone is actively disrespecting you when they spell it wrong or say it wrong, but if you can make a point to spell it correctly and say it correctly, if I don't know, I always ask. Like if I'm ever first meeting someone, especially on like a video call, I will ask them to pronounce their name right off the bat. And spelling, it just shows that if you spell someone's name correctly, that you actually paid attention. I've actually had one person in my life spell it incorrectly and come back later and said, "Oh my goodness, I can't believe I made this mistake." Like you could tell they understood this concept. So maybe you can apply this to your life and see what comes of it. I certainly noticed given the spelling of my name. Okay, so why is a former professional musician now certified financial planner in the music industry? It's because of this checking account. I tell this story every time I do this live stream, so I'll try to keep it short this time. Essentially, I was a professional musician for almost 20 years. I came back from a tour one summer with $67 to my name. It was a big surprise and shock. Up until that point, I had been really good with my money. thought I'd been doing everything I needed to be doing with it. I was living the dream of performing professionally and still sort of had nothing to show for it at this moment in time. And so it was a shock, felt scared, vulnerable, unworthy, and it changed my perspective on a lot of things. So I just remember telling myself, I never want to feel this way again, and no one else in the music industry should either. I don't understand why this is the norm, to be a starving artist or to just neglect personal finances altogether in the music industry. So I started teaching myself everything I could through books and podcasts, applied everything I learned to my life, improved my relationship with money, my mindset. Over the next 18 months, a relatively short amount of time, my income increased because I knew how to talk about it. I knew how it operated in my life and in others' lives. And I was still performing professionally at that time. I started saving into a retirement account for the first time, and I actually bought my first property. I bought a condo 18 months from this date. So a lot can change in a short amount of time if you put your mind to it. And so I started teaching everything I learned to my music community. I thought everyone should know this stuff. I mean, it's nothing crazy. And so I started a podcast, a blog, newsletter, coaching program, started giving talks at universities and conferences, things of that nature. And eventually that curiosity led me to want to learn this material at a professional level. So I became a certified financial planner and started my firm, my flat fee advice only holistic financial life planning firm. Well, that's a mouthful. Motif Planning. About 2 years ago. So that's why we're here. So quick disclaimer, this is educational only. None of this is advice because I don't know your unique situation. I don't know everything about your unique situation. So this is all going to be general advice. And even with any question that I get, usually the answer is it depends. So I'll probably follow up your question with more questions. And that will determine the answer. So this is not personal financial advice or tax advice. Okay, let's get into it. So it's easy to forget about your old retirement accounts because you've moved on. You don't maybe understand how it worked. Maybe you don't even think it's yours. But this is your money. And it's likely been invested in some way. Hopefully, it wasn't just in cash. Sometimes that can happen too, where you didn't even invest the money you had in your retirement plan. But it's sitting there invested in some way, usually however you left it. Unless your company has made changes to the options available, which is something we'll talk about here in a second. But this is your money. And it's likely that this money is potentially growing depending on how you have it invested. And if you forget about it, then what are you going to do when you retire and you want to start living off your own assets? If you don't have a way to log into this or things have changed, you need to do something with this. So I'm going to talk about the 4 different options you have with old retirement accounts. And this is whether you change jobs or you are now self-employed. It doesn't matter. You can use one of these 4 options. So first we have to find them. It might have been 10 years since you had this account. It might be 6 months. So we need to find those past accounts. So the older they are, sometimes it can be a little harder to find, but there are a few ways to do that. Pretty simply, just check your past records. If you have any old documents from your work, emails, any pay stubs, any portal logins, if your retirement account was at Fidelity, Voya, ADP, there's all sorts of custodians that your account could be at. If you have those logins, you simply log in and it should still be there. If you don't know how to do that or haven't found it yet, you can contact your former employer, and they should be able to help you find it because they have all the records. Give them your name, prove that it's you, and there should be a way. Because remember, it's still your money. It's not their money, for the most part, which we'll talk about in a minute. And if that doesn't work, the company doesn't exist anymore. I mean, there's so many things that could happen, especially if we're talking a long period of time. Then we could start using government resources. There's a Department of Labor. They literally have a retirement savings lost and found database that you can search to find. So first step is we got to find those accounts. We need to understand what type of account it is. Is it a 401k, a 403b, a 457? Is the money in it pre-tax or Roth? What's going on? How is the money invested and so forth? So your 4 options, once you find them, is you can leave it there at your old employer. You can roll it to your new employer, or you can roll it to your own personal rollover IRA, individual retirement account, or you can cash it out. In general, those are your 4 options. So let's look at each one at a high level. If you want to leave it at your former employer plan, there are some scenarios where this makes sense. In most cases, that's not the case. So the positives are you don't have to do anything. You just let it sit there. When you keep your money in that plan, the investments continue to grow tax deferred. So you're not paying tax as it grows. And they may have investments that are favorable. And I'll talk a little bit more about what that means in a future slide here in a moment. So we're going to want to analyze that and see what the investment options are. Have they changed? And if they have, did they automatically move you to similar investments than what you had picked earlier? What are the rules around if that ever happens again? So this kind of starts diving into the cons, is that you no longer work there. So you're a little bit more removed. So sometimes it can be harder to access. You might not get notifications and updates that are relevant. Companies will switch custodians a lot. Not all the time, but I've seen it a lot, where they switch from Fidelity to Vanguard. Well, do they offer the same investment options? Did you know that they switched custodians? And so if you're no longer working there, there just might be, it might be harder to keep up with any changes that are made. And also a con might be that the investment options that they give you are very limited. They only have like 10 or 15 things you can pick from. Or the fees of those funds are very high. I've seen that quite a bit. Or they just don't have enough funds where you can build a diversified portfolio. So it really depends on your situation. There are situations where it does make sense to keep it at your old job, where they do offer funds that are very low cost and diversified. So you just have to do the analysis and look to see if you should really do this. And if you do decide to keep it there, make sure you have a connection point to keep up with any changes that the company might make, given that you are no longer an employee. There also could be more fees if you're not an employee. The administration fees might go up. So a lot of things could change. You just need to look at all that, and that should help with your decision making. The other option is to roll it into your new employer plan. So this assumes that your new plan allows that. Most plans allow for you to roll old retirement plans into your current one. So in most cases, I haven't seen that being an issue, but you want to make sure that that's allowed first off. And so the main way that you would do this is a trustee to trustee transfer, meaning the money just directly transfers from that retirement account to your new one. You don't ever touch the money. It never comes into your banking, your checking, savings. You don't touch it or ever have access to it, right? And that's a good thing. We want to keep the money in there qualified. We don't want to pay taxes on anything if we're moving stuff. So a pro is that it consolidates your accounts. Some of you may have had 5 jobs, 10 jobs over the course of your career, and you have all these retirement accounts all over the place, and you don't want to keep up with them. They all have different investment options, and we can consolidate those all into one account. Making your financial life simple is always a good idea. And so just weighing the simplicity versus the benefits of not keeping it simple is something to think about. Just like keeping it in your old plan, by moving it to the new one, it keeps the money qualified. So that means the investments continue to grow tax deferred. And I'll talk about the pro rata rule briefly. It's a little bit of a complex topic, but if you keep the money, if you don't roll the money to your own rollover IRA, we are avoiding the pro rata rule. So I'll come back to that later, but that is a potential reason to do this. And a con is that, like I mentioned, with your old employer not having great investment options, your current employer might not have great investment options. So that's something to weigh if against some of the other pros, is that what they're offering here is not great, so I think I'd rather move it to my own rollover IRA which I'll talk about in a moment, where you can invest however you want. And then you're going to want to look at the fees as well of your current plan. And then there are some other rules I'm not going to talk about today that you're going to want to understand what's possible that will help you make a decision as well. The other option, if we're not moving it to your current company, or if you're self-employed, there is no new company retirement plan available, is you can roll it to a rollover IRA. And so you can do this at any custodian, Fidelity, Vanguard, Schwab, there's all kinds of custodians out there. And you can transfer the funds from your 401k, 403b, 457, whatever the retirement plan was at your company, and roll it to your now personal rollover IRA. One thing to keep in mind is that traditional money or pre-tax money that you contributed to your, I'll just call them 401ks, all the different retirement plans at your work, have to go to a traditional IRA. Any Roth or after-tax funds that you have contributed to your company plan has to go to a Roth IRA. Okay, so those funds have to be separated into two different, essentially rollover IRAs. We don't call Roth IRAs rollovers, but it would basically, if you did have both versions of money in your qualified retirement account, we would move pre-tax traditional funds to a rollover IRA. We would move the Roth funds to a Roth IRA. So a pro of this is you gain full control over your investment options. You can invest in whatever you want. You're not limited to the company menu that they provide to you. So you can access thousands of low-cost mutual funds, ETFs, individual holdings, whatever you want. I'm not going to give investment advice, but you have more flexibility around how you're investing and the fees associated with those investments. And, in most cases, these custodians are free, so there's very low costs to use them, and so you're avoiding some of the fees that you incur from your company plan. And like I mentioned before, you can separate traditional and Roth money, which has its advantages, especially with the pro rata rule, which I'll talk about briefly in a moment. Which I'm about to talk about. So the cons is, if you want to do a backdoor Roth, this is a financial planning strategy for those of us in higher incomes above the threshold to contribute to Roth IRAs or deduct traditional IRA contributions. The last option you have to contribute to your IRAs is to do after-tax contributions. And then you can do what's called a backdoor Roth, which is you move that money into a Roth so that the money can grow tax-free for the rest of your life. And the biggest hurdle for a backdoor Roth is called the pro rata rule. And so how this works is any funds that you have in a traditional IRA are subject to the pro rata rule, which at a high level complicates and almost makes it not worth doing a backdoor Roth because the taxes are a lot higher than if you didn't have other IRA balances. So by keeping your money in a 401k, 403b, 457 qualified account like that at your company, you are keeping that money. That money in those qualified accounts are not subject to the pro rata rule, which allows you to more freely and more advantageously and efficiently do a backdoor Roth strategy without paying too much tax. Yep. So the fourth option is to cash it out. And in my opinion, this is sort of last resort. But the pro is you have quick access to cash. It can help cover emergencies or transition expenses. If you're having trouble, a lot of people in the music industry it's taking a long time for them to find a new job, and it's just if you're at your wit's end and this is your last option, it is something that you can do, if you're facing financial hardship. The cons are you will owe income tax and pay a 10% penalty on any withdrawals if you are under the age of 59 and a half. And then the most devastating is that it permanently reduces your retirement savings and future compound growth because that money's no longer growing. You've taken it and used it. So there are situations where this is necessary, right? But always a last resort, in my opinion. But this is the fourth option. And I don't have it on the slides here, but some 401ks allow you to take a loan from your 401k. So that might be something to consider, just making sure you understand the rules, the interest rate. That would probably be, they might not allow loans. Like if you kept it at your old employer and you're not employed there, they might not allow loans. But so you'd have to figure out if you would rather take a loan from it before actually just cashing it out. Then if you moved it to your new employer, do they allow loans? Okay, well then maybe that's the move. So it can get complicated very fast depending on your situation, and if you're thinking about doing the loan, then that sort of changes which one of these options you should consider. Okay, before I move on, I'm going to check really quick and see if we've got any questions. Okay. I don't think so. Okay, so besides the decision, which, there is the investment component in your old 401k, if you moved it to your new one, or if you moved it to your own, what we want to do is we want to analyze where your investments, how they're invested right now, and then what are your options at a new company. And then of course we know that if you rolled it to your own IRA, you could do whatever you want. So we were going to look at the ticker symbols. How are you holding broad index funds or niche investments? Expense ratios, which is another just fancy word for what are the fees for the funds that you're in, and then what's the performance history. These are just some high-level things to look at to understand what your current situation is, looking at the investment options of your new company plan, comparing that, and then also just how would you invest if you had your own rollover IRA. So this is an example. Everything's fake on here, fake ticker symbols and numbers, but this is what a statement might look like in your 401k. So you have the holding, you got a company large cap fund, a company bond fund, international equity, emerging markets, sustainable equity. You got the ticker symbol, that's what you type in when you go to buy and sell. You use the ticker symbol. The expense ratio, that is the fee. And I'll explain what that means in a minute. And then you've got all the different returns based on different periods of time. We've got our year-to-date return, the last 3 months, the last 6 months, the last year, the last 5 years, and then like the maximum, what is it returned over the entire course of your investment. Now, what these numbers will likely show is the history of the fund itself. And so it would be different returns for when you were invested in it, right? So this is just information about the fund itself. It's not necessarily the returns that you got, because it depends on when you invested in the funds, and if you were contributing monthly additionally to these, that's going to be a different return number. So this is more just looking at the performance of these funds. But the most important thing in most cases is the diversification of your investments and the fees. So let's talk about the expense ratio. So when you see like company large cap fund is 0.14 and company bond fund is 1.41, that means for every $1,000, you apply that percentage to see what the annual fee would be. So let's simplify it a little bit more. So we're going to, at the bottom, we've got a cost comparison. We've got expense ratio of 0.05 right here. And then we've got an expense ratio of 2.00. So for every $1,000 that you have in a fund that is 0.05 versus 2, you're annually paying 50 cents or $20. And so as the number goes up, let's say you've got $100,000 in a fund, you're paying $50 a year for this expense ratio, and $2,000 a year for this expense ratio. So you can see, and whenever you think about your entire portfolio, you can look at what's the average expense ratio of my entire portfolio. And let's say you've got $1 million, you can see how the expense ratio difference really changes the fee that you're paying to be in those funds. And so we want to be looking at the fees, because the biggest impact on your investments in most cases is the fees and taxes. We're already being efficient on the tax side by having the funds in a 401k, because as the investments grow, they're tax deferred, and whether you do traditional or Roth, you either get a tax benefit when you contribute or when you withdraw. So we're getting advantages on the tax side. So the fee side is where you have a lot more optionality of where you're investing. So we really want to be looking at low fees, because that can really eat away at your returns. Tax and transfer considerations. Okay, so remember, like I said, when you have traditional and Roth in a 401k, we're going to be separating those whenever you do any kind of transfer. If possible, whenever you're deciding to do a transfer, you want to do a direct transfer if possible. It's not often that I see this, because what will happen is your original company will have certain investment options that are not available at your new company, or not available to retail investors in a rollover IRA. So what will happen is your old 401k will write you a check. Now, they will not write you personally a check. They will write a check out to rollover A for benefit of your name, right? Because you don't ever want the funds to come into your personal accounts, right? Because then we lose the qualified tax status of that money. And so if we can do a direct transfer, it will automatically move the money over. But it's not always that likely, because both places have to have the same investment options available, so that you don't have to sell the investments. If not, then they will write a check. So what they do is they sell all the holdings, turns it all into cash, write you a check, and then you have 60 days to redeposit that check into the destination account, okay? So that we avoid taxes and penalties. So you really want to make sure you're following those rules. And it can kind of be stressful to have a check mailed. So if possible, pay for overnight, whatever it takes, especially if you have large funds that you're transferring. Okay, so depending on what accounts you're coming from and going to, there are different rules. And I'm not going to go into this in too great a detail, but IRS Publication 590 shows this of all the possible transfers. So if you're going from a qualified plan over here to the left, like a 401k, and you're going to a Roth IRA, yes, you can do that. Okay. If you're going from, let's say a Roth 401k to a traditional IRA, no, you can't do that. Okay. So in most cases, the answer is yes, but sometimes you can't. Sometimes there is a waiting period, especially around simple IRAs. So of course, it just depends on your situation. But in most cases, you should be able to do the transfer. You just want to make sure you're following the rules. So I just wanted to show them here. Okay, so the pro rata rule, I pretty much already explained this, but I'll kind of just say it hopefully in a more simple way. If you're doing the backdoor Roth IRA strategy, so remember, this means that your income is above the income limit or phase out to contribute to Roth IRA or deduct traditional IRA contributions. That means you can still contribute to a traditional IRA, you just can't deduct that contribution from your taxable income. And that's called an after-tax contribution. And so that money, you've already paid tax on that money, but it grows tax deferred. And then any growth, when you start withdrawing from it later, gets taxed. So what you can do is potentially do a backdoor Roth strategy, which means you contribute to the after-tax IRA, and then you move that money to a Roth IRA. It's like an extra step to get money into a Roth IRA when your income is above the phase-out limit to directly contribute to it. And this strategy might not be available forever. The government might turn it off. So right now, as of this recording, you can still do this. But the pro rata rule is if you have just your after-tax IRA and no other IRAs, then you are only taxed on the growth when you move the after-tax contributions to Roth IRA. If you have a rollover IRA, then there is a calculation that essentially includes all of your rollover IRA money and only a very small percentage of the backdoor Roth rollover avoids tax. So it basically makes it to where it's not really worth doing. So without getting any more confusing or complex, I'll leave it at that. But there are situations where you might want to keep your 401k at your old company or move it to your new company to avoid the pro rata rule. And it just depends on your situation, depends on the math. And so that's something where you need to work with a financial planner to figure that out. So the next steps, you got to find all your accounts, evaluate those different options in the investments, and decide what you want to do and take the action and do it. In the end, it's not that difficult. And once you've got it done, you're done. You can move on and not think about it anymore. Go back to set it and forget it until you change jobs or careers again. So I mentioned contributing to accounts, tax and transfer rules. There's a lot of rules around finances these days, and it can get pretty complex. How much can you contribute? What are your tax brackets? There's a lot of numbers that you need to understand when you're making these financial decisions. And so I have a PDF, it's just 2 pages that shows you all the relevant numbers you need to know this year in 2025. And if you want that, you can just sign up to my newsletter on my website, motifplanning.com. You just sign up for the newsletter and just make sure you check your spam or promotions folder and confirm your email, or else you won't get this. But basically, the first email that it will automatically send you is this PDF with all these numbers that should be relevant for you to make financial decisions. And then I'll send you a couple more emails, like free access to my financial planning software if you want to mess around in there, and a lot of other resources that I think would be helpful for you. So feel free to sign up, completely free. Just sign up to the newsletter and make sure to confirm your email. And real quick, if you are looking for holistic financial life advice, I do flat fee advice only holistic financial planning. If you want to learn more, we can have a call for free. Let's just talk. I want to hear your story, see if we're a good fit. If not, I'll recommend to you someone who is a good fit. No pressure at all. Just go to my website and there's a big button to schedule a call and we can talk about that. So I'll check one more time to see if we have any questions. Feel free to go to my website. You can go to education, read my blog, got a lot of resources on there. You can go follow me at Spencer List, mainly on LinkedIn, but I'm other places as well, doing these live streams on a regular basis. The newsletter you can sign up for. I do speaking engagements, pro bono work for people facing financial hardship, literally just everything under the sun. And feel free to email me at spencer@motifplanning.com. So let me check to see if we have any questions. And if not, we will wrap up. And we've got some good live streams coming up. I have one I'm going to do about credit cards. I'm having one where I will talk about all the big tax law changes that just were approved and how that may or may not affect you in your financial planning. I'm going to be talking about how to plan for children. So that's going to be a really good one with my friend Natalie. And yeah, I think that's it for now. So if you have any questions, I'll stay on here for a couple more minutes. I'll switch it to the outro and I'll just answer them in the comments. And I hope you all have a good rest of your day. Keep thriving.